Somebody somewhere just unlocked a vault that was supposed to stay sealed forever, and what rolled out of it has the entire internet staring at their screens with their jaws on the floor. We are talking about never-before-seen studio footage of a teenager superstar, a phone call with the biggest entertainer who ever lived, and one single sentence from a grown man in that room that has turned a feel-good charity moment into one of the most disturbing pop culture conversations of the year. And before anybody tries to brush this off, hear me clearly. This is not fan fiction. This is not an AI fake. This is real archival footage, shot by a real producer, confirmed by real reporting, and the moment you see what is happening in that room, you will understand why millions of people are asking the exact same question tonight. What was really going on behind the curtain back then? And how many young women were standing in rooms just like that one, smiling for a camera while powerful men ran the show? Now, I have to do my due diligence before we go one inch further, because this story is moving fast and half of what is being posted about it is sloppy. Everything in this video is based on leaked footage, public interviews, documented history, and social media reaction. Where something is a rumor, I will say it is a rumor. Where something is confirmed, I will say it is confirmed. Deal? Deal. Because this one deserves to be handled with precision, not hysteria, and honestly, the part that we can confirm is already wild enough on its own. So here is what we know for a fact. In 2001, a young Beyoncé Knowles, 19 years old, still the front woman of Destiny's Child, not yet the solo empire she would later become, walked into a recording studio as part of a massive charity project organized by Michael Jackson. The song was called What More Can I Give? And it was Michael's attempt to build a second We Are the World, an all-star anthem intended to raise money for the victims of 9/11. Dozens of artists took part. Beyoncé and Destiny's Child were among them. None of that is disputed. None of that is secret. It was a real project with a real purpose, and some of the biggest names in music answered that call. The man filming that day was a producer and Michael Jackson associate named Marc Schaffel. And you need to remember that name, because Schaffel spent roughly 3 years, from about 2000 to 2003, shooting enormous amounts of behind-the-scenes footage around Michael, reportedly for a reality-style documentary project that never saw the light of day. The tapes sat in an archive. The years went by, and then, out of nowhere, this footage starts resurfacing as part of a planned multi-part docuseries, which is the only reason any of us are seeing it right now. A quarter of a century later, the vault opens. And the very first thing the culture sees is Beyoncé, 19 years old, sitting in a grown man's lap. Let me paint the scene exactly as it plays out, because the details matter. The camera is rolling inside the studio. Michael Jackson is on the phone. He is not physically in the room, and he is, by every account, genuinely invested in this record. He had the flu when he cut the demo. You can hear it in his voice, and everybody in that studio is treating that scratch vocal like it is scripture. And then, before the call connects, Schaffel gestures toward Beyoncé and invites her to sit on his lap to make the speakerphone conversation, quote, easier. And she does. A 19-year-old girl, at the absolute peak of Destiny's Child mania, takes a seat on the lap of a producer old enough to be her father, and the call begins. And I want to be fair here. I really do. Because context matters, and I am not going to pretend the camera captured a crime. It did not. What the camera captured was a vibe, an atmosphere, a room where nobody, not Beyoncé, not the engineers, not another soul present, seemed to register anything strange about a teenage star perched on a producer's lap while the king of pop crackled through a speakerphone. And that right there is what has people spiraling. Not what happened. How normal it all looked. During the call itself, Michael is gracious. Beyoncé is nervous, visibly, audibly nervous. At one point she is literally shaking, and the room chuckles softly about it the way adults chuckle at a kid meeting their hero. She tells Michael she is honored. She tells him she screamed when she heard the very first line of the song. Michael, ever the perfectionist, worries out loud about how his flu-damaged voice sounds on the demo, and the room rushes to reassure him. There are warm love yous exchanged as the call wraps. Michael says it. Beyoncé says it right back. And anybody who followed his career knows that was simply how he spoke to collaborators. Then the call ends. Schaffel remarks that Michael gets very emotional over this project, and the session rolls on like nothing unusual just happened. That is the footage. That is all of it. No scandal in the legal sense. No smoking gun in the criminal sense. And yet, and this is why you clicked, and you were right to click, the internet did not see a sweet charity session. The internet saw a time capsule from an era with no smartphones, no social media, no movement for accountability, no receipts of any kind, and it saw a teenage girl being waved into a powerful man's lap like it was furniture arrangement. And the question that has now been viewed, stitched, duet, and dissected millions upon millions of times is brutally simple. If this is what the music industry looked like when the cameras were rolling, what did it look like when they were not? Now here is where I need everybody to lean in, because this is the part of the conversation where the footage stops being about one afternoon in 2001 and starts being about an entire machine. Think about the era we are talking about. No camera phones, no Twitter, no TikTok detectives. If something happened behind a closed studio door in 2001, there were exactly two ways the public could ever find out. Somebody powerful confessed, or somebody brave came forward years later and risked everything to tell it. That was it. That was the entire accountability system. And when you really sit with that, when you let that sink all the way in, you start to understand why so many of the people watching this Beyoncé clip are not laughing at it. They are looking at it like evidence, not evidence of one moment, but evidence of a culture. A culture where a young woman's comfort was never the priority, where access was currency, and where the adults in the room decided what normal looked like. And listen, I know some of y'all have been saying this for years. I know there is a whole corner of the internet that has been side-eyeing the early 2000s industry for a long time. And right now that entire corner is having its "we told you so" moment. But hold that thought, because the footage is only layer one of the story. Layer two is a math problem. And the math problem is where this whole thing goes from uncomfortable to genuinely haunting. Because here is the thing about Beyoncé's timeline that people have been whispering about forever, and this newly surfaced footage just poured gasoline all over it. In 2007, Jay-Z sat down with Charlie Rose for one of those long, thoughtful, prestige interviews, the kind where artists relax, get reflective, and sometimes say a little more than their publicist would prefer. And during that conversation, when the subject turned to how the two biggest names in music first crossed paths, Jay-Z did what Jay-Z does. He got nostalgic. He talked about award shows, about mutual respect, about that classic, "Yo, we gotta do something together" energy that floats around the industry before it turns into real collaboration. Standard stuff. And then Charlie Rose pressed him on the timeline. Was it 5 years ago? And Jay-Z, smiling, corrected him. "I met her 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Now run the math with me, slowly, because this is the part the internet cannot unhear." That interview was in 2007. 10 years before 2007 is 1997. And in 1997, Beyoncé Knowles, born September 4th, 1981, was 16 years old. 16. Jay-Z, for the record, was born in December of 1969, which made him 27 or 28 at that time. Now, to be crystal clear, because precision matters in a conversation this sensitive, meeting someone is not a crime. Knowing of somebody, crossing paths at award shows, being aware of a rising talent, none of that is inherently anything. Jay-Z never said they dated in 1997. He said he knew her, was aware of her, thought she was a fantastic talent. That is what is on the record. But when you place that timeline next to this newly resurfaced footage, next to the image of a teenage Beyoncé being waved into a grown man's lap like it was nothing, people are not just connecting dots anymore. They are connecting a pattern. And this is where the conversation expands beyond any one couple, any one studio, any one afternoon, because the culture has receipts now that it did not have back then. Think about what we now know, confirmed, litigated, testified to knowledge about how that era operated. Aaliyah was married to R. Kelly when she was 15 years old, with a falsified document, in a ceremony that the industry whispered about for decades and did essentially nothing to stop. She was a child, a literal child, and the machine kept humming. Albums kept dropping. Checks kept clearing. It took a quarter of a century and a federal trial for that story to be fully dragged into the light. So when people look at this Beyoncé footage and feel a chill, they are not being dramatic. They are remembering a pattern that the industry itself has since confirmed was real. And let me be fair to Beyoncé for a second, genuinely fair, because the most viral framing of this story paints her as a victim, and the second most viral framing paints her as complicit, and I think both of those frames are too lazy for what we are actually looking at. What we are actually looking at is a teenager inside a system built and run by adults. 19 years old, in a room full of powerful men, being told how to sit and where to sit, doing exactly what the culture of that moment trained young women to do. Smile, comply, be gracious, do not make it weird. If you have ever been the youngest person in a professional room, you know that pressure. Now multiply it by 1,000,000, add the king of pop on the phone, add a camera, add a producer with his hand gesturing you onto his lap, and ask yourself honestly what choices a 19-year-old really had in that moment. That is the question underneath all the noise. That is the question this footage is really asking. Now, the internet, being the internet, has split into warring camps over this, and the camps are telling. On one side, you have people saying, plainly, that the industry was predatory, and this footage is Exhibit A, that a young woman was put in a compromising position by men who knew better, and the only reason it looks normal is because the whole era was sick. One viral comment put it bluntly: the industry is weird and predatory, period. On the other side, you have people pushing back, arguing that Beyoncé was an ambitious professional in a collaborative setting, that the lap moment was casual and consensual in context, and that projecting 2026 standards onto a 2001 room is revisionist history. Some corners have gone uglier, questioning Beyoncé's own agency in ways that veer straight into victim blaming. And then there is a third camp, quieter but growing, asking the structural question: where was everybody else? Where were the adults whose actual job was protection? Because Beyoncé had parents. She had management. Her father, Matthew Knowles, ran Destiny's Child with an iron grip. So where was the iron grip in that studio? And pay attention to how the two leaks interact, because that interaction is not an accident of the algorithm. It is a stress test. The victim narrative makes you protective of her. The fraud narrative makes you suspicious of her. And when both hit your feed in the same week, you are not being informed anymore. You are being sorted. Sorted into a camp, handed a jersey, and sent into a comment section to defend a position you assembled from two clips totaling maybe 90 seconds. That is not journalism, and it is not justice. That is engagement farming with a famous face as the crop. And the most unsettling part? Both clips are real. Authentic footage, authentic quotes, deployed like chess pieces. You do not have to fake anything to manipulate a narrative in 2026. You just have to choose the order the truth arrives in. And see, that is the open loop that keeps this story alive, because nobody has a clean answer. The footage raises 100 questions and resolves none of them, and that is exactly why it is spreading the way it is spreading. Every viewer becomes a juror. Every comment section becomes a courtroom. And whether you land on "she was preyed upon" or "you are all reaching," you cannot watch that clip and feel nothing, and content that makes you feel nothing does not move. This moved. But wait, because this story has a second leak, and the second leak is doing something completely different to Beyoncé's image. If the studio footage struck the victim nerve, this next clip strikes the exact opposite nerve, and the whiplash between the two is what makes this moment so chaotic for her camp. Because while half the internet was processing the image of a teenage Beyoncé in a predatory-feeling industry, the other half was resurfacing an old interview clip where Beyoncé says, in her own voice, in her own words, on camera, that she does not listen to country music. Never has. Direct quote: "I don't listen to country. I never have." Now, in a vacuum, that is a harmless statement. Artists are allowed to have tastes. But here is the problem. Beyoncé just won the Grammy for Best Country Album. She made country music history. She stood on that stage, in that category, as the industry's crowned representative of a genre, and now a clip is circulating of her saying she never even listened to it. And the country music community, which already felt a certain way about her entrance into their space, is treating this clip like a confession. The argument writes itself. How does someone who never listened to country music become the genre's biggest award winner? Was the album an artistic evolution, or a calculated genre raid, engineered by the most powerful machine in music, aimed at a trophy the industry decided she should have? Let me steelman Beyoncé here, because I said I would be fair. Artists evolve. Tastes change. A person can grow up in Texas surrounded by country stations, not personally vibe with the genre, and then later, as a mature artist, find a genuine connection to its storytelling tradition and make something real inside it. That happens. Creative journeys are not linear, and nobody is obligated to have a pristine genre resume before making a great album. Cowboy Carter, love it or hate it, was a massive, ambitious, research-heavy project. She brought in legends. She spotlighted black country history that the mainstream had buried. There is a real argument that the album mattered beyond the trophy. But, and you knew there was a but, the optics of that clip are brutal. I don't listen to country. I never have. In her own words. In her own voice. And in a moment where the internet is already primed to question everything about how Beyoncé's career was built, primed by the studio footage, primed by years of Illuminati jokes and industry plant theories, and who did she step on to get here discourse, that clip lands like a brick. Because it feeds the single most persistent suspicion about Beyoncé's entire career, that everything is strategy, nothing is authentic, and the machine behind her is so powerful that even genres bend when she walks in. And this is the part nobody in her camp wants to say out loud, so I will say it. For 20+ years, Beyoncé and Jay-Z ran the most airtight image operation in entertainment history. Think about it. No scandals that stuck. No leaks that landed. The elevator incident got absorbed and turned into an album. The cheating got absorbed and turned into 2 albums. Every crack in the empire got paved over with platinum. Jay took his hits, and last year he took a serious one, when his name got dragged into a lawsuit connected to the Diddy fallout, an allegation he vehemently denied and fought publicly. But Beyoncé? Beyoncé was untouchable. The most protected brand in music. Critics got frozen out. Journalists got managed. The narrative stayed spotless. And now, in a single news cycle, there are 2 leaks. One from 2001, making her look like a victim of the machine. One from an old interview, making her look like a fraud atop the machine. 2 opposite attacks, same target, same week. And I need y'all to really think about this, because it is the question that ties this entire story together. Who opens a 25-year-old vault right now? Who decides that 2026 is the moment for Marc Schaffel's archive to see daylight, and for country music clips to start recirculating at the exact same time? Is this a coincidence, a random convergence of internet archaeology, or is somebody, somewhere, very deliberately loosening the bolts on the most protected brand in music? And to really understand the weight of that question, you have to rewind the tape even further, all the way back to Houston, Texas. Because long before Beyoncé was a solo deity, she was a little girl in a group called Girls' Time, grinding through talent shows under the strict, all-consuming management of her father, Matthew Knowles. Matthew famously walked away from a corporate career to build his daughter's dream full-time. Her mother, Tina, designed the outfits. The family mortgaged comfort for the mission. After a nationally televised loss on Star Search that would have broken most kids, the group regrouped, rebranded as Destiny's Child, and finally signed with Columbia Records. And pay attention to this date. In 1997, the very same year that Jay-Z, by his own on-camera admission, first became aware of Beyoncé. She was 16, newly signed, and the machine had just switched on. Now here is a detail about that machine that makes the 2001 studio footage even more striking. Destiny's Child was run with military-grade image discipline. Matthew Knowles controlled access, messaging, media training, everything. This was the operation that famously swapped group members like chess pieces. In early 2000, LaToya Luckett and Latavia Roberson were out. Michelle Williams and Farrah Franklin were in. Farrah was gone within months. Lawsuits flew. And the group answered all of it not with an apology tour, but with Survivor, a #1 anthem that turned internal bloodshed into brand mythology. That is how tight the Knowles ship was. Every public move was scripted. Every interview was rehearsed. Every narrative was managed. Which is exactly why that studio clip hits so strange. Because for one afternoon in 2001, the camera caught Beyoncé outside the fortress. No Matthew between her and the room. No media training between her and the moment. Just a teenager on a producer's lap, shaking on a phone call, while the adults ran the show. The most protected girl in the industry, caught on the one day the protection is nowhere in frame. And the timing, y'all. The timing is what gives this footage its eerie glow. In early September of 2001, September 7th and 10th, to be exact, Michael Jackson held his 30th anniversary celebration concerts at Madison Square Garden, and Destiny's Child was on that stage. Handpicked among the performers honoring the king of pop, Beyoncé was 19, sharing a bill with a living legend at the peak of her girl group fame. And then, one day after the second concert, the towers fell. The world cracked open. And within weeks, Michael Jackson, by all accounts genuinely devastated, threw himself into organizing What More Can I Give?, pulling together a supergroup of stars to record a benefit anthem for the victims. That is the session we are watching in this footage. That is why Beyoncé was in that studio. The song would go on to headline a star-studded benefit concert in Washington weeks later, with Destiny's Child among the performers. And then, in one of the strangest epilogues in pop history, the record itself got buried. Label politics, disputes behind the scenes, and the single never received the proper commercial release it was built for. Michael's great healing anthem became a lost record, and the footage of its making went into a vault, until now. Which brings us back to the man holding the camera. Marc Schaffel was not just some random studio assistant. He was a videographer with deep access to Michael Jackson's inner world during one of the most turbulent stretches of Michael's life. And after Michael's world collapsed, Schaffel's relationship with the Jackson camp ended up in court, with lawsuits flying in both directions and serious money on the table. Point being, this is a man who knows exactly what his archive is worth. He shot behind-the-scenes material for years for a documentary project that never materialized, sat on the tapes through Michael's death, through the estate wars, through everything. And now here comes a 3-part docuseries, and suddenly the vault door swings open, and the first thing out is a clip engineered to detonate on contact. Follow the incentive, y'all. Every share, every stitch, every outrage comment about this footage is free marketing for that project. The outrage is the rollout. I am not saying the footage is fake. It is not fake. That is the whole problem. I am saying the timing is a business decision wearing a journalism costume. And there is one more layer of voltage here that nobody can ignore. This is Michael Jackson footage landing in a post-2019 world. Ever since the accusations against Michael were relitigated in the court of streaming documentaries, allegations his estate has always fiercely denied, battles that are still being fought legally to this day. Every frame of footage from Michael's orbit gets reread through a darker lens by default. Fair or not, that is the culture now. A room that looked innocent in 2001 gets audited like a crime scene in 2026. And yet, and this is the complication the outrage merchants do not want you to sit with, by every account from that day, Michael was not even in the building. He was a voice on a speakerphone with the flu, asking a young singer to pour her heart into a charity record. And Beyoncé's own documented history with Michael cuts against the darkest reading. After his death in 2009, she wrote a public tribute saying that Michael changed her, that watching him taught her what it meant to be an artist, and she thanked him for it. Whatever else was true about that era, her relationship to his memory was gratitude, not trauma. Both of those things get to be true at once, and any honest conversation has to hold both. Oh, and because the internet cannot help itself. Yes, the age conspiracy theorists have entered the chat. You know the one, the decades-old, never-substantiated rumor that Beyoncé is secretly older than her public records say. And this footage got sucked straight into that rabbit hole too, with people freeze-framing a 19-year-old's face like forensic analysts. Let me save everybody some time. There is no credible evidence, none, zero, behind the age conspiracy. It is one of the longest-running bits of internet folklore and pop culture, and it has survived purely because Beyoncé has been famous for so long that people have lost all sense of her timeline. The girl on Star Search as a child, the teen signing to Columbia in 1997, the 19-year-old in this footage. The timeline is documented, consistent, and boring. The boring answer is the real one. Moving on. Meanwhile, the comment sections have become a full-contact sport, and the arguments themselves tell you everything about where the culture's head is at. You have the protection camp. She is literally shaking with nerves, and y'all are out here sexualizing a charity call. You have the reckoning camp. The way they were so comfortable passing a teenage girl around the room tells you this was standard operating procedure. You have the structural critics pointing out that young black women in that era were the least protected people in the entire industry, adultified by everyone around them, handed adult pressures and adult rooms while still being teenagers, with nobody whose job it was to say not like this. And you have the skeptics asking, again and again, the question that will not die. Where was the machine that day? The father manager with the iron grip, the label, the handlers, an entire apparatus existed to control Beyoncé's image, and somehow it had nothing to say about the lap? The footage does not answer that. That is why it keeps people up at night. Now, back to that second leak, because I do not want the country music controversy to get lost in the noise. It deserves its own autopsy. When Beyoncé won Best Country Album, on top of taking Album of the Year, finally, after the most famous Grammy snubs of the modern era, the victory was already radioactive in Nashville circles. Country radio had given Texas Hold'em a lukewarm embrace at best. Gatekeepers had grumbled loudly about genre tourism, and none of that was new territory for her. Back in 2016, her performance of Daddy Lessons with the Chicks at the CMA Awards triggered a wave of backlash so ugly that the performance video briefly vanished from official channels. So when Cowboy Carter arrived, complete with a country legend like Willie Nelson on the track list, a Jolene rework blessed by Dolly Parton herself, and spoken interludes from Linda Martell, the pioneering black woman country tried to erase. It was explicitly framed as a reclamation. And into that already hostile climate drops this resurfaced clip, young Beyoncé, on camera, saying she does not listen to country music and never has. To her defenders, it is a decades-old soundbite about a teenager's taste, meaningless against a grown artist's evolution. To her critics, it is the receipt they always dreamed of, proof, they say, that the genre was a costume, the award was politics, and the industry's biggest machine simply willed a trophy into existence. 2 readings. 1 clip. Endless fuel. So we land here. 2 pieces of archival footage, 25 years apart in spirit, converging on the same woman in the same week. One casting Beyoncé as a teenager failed by the adults in the room. The other casting Beyoncé as the ultimate industry insider who gets whatever room she wants. And notice how both narratives, as opposite as they are, serve the same hunger. The hunger to finally crack the most fortified image in entertainment. Because that is the real story underneath both leaks. For 2 decades, nothing stuck to Beyoncé. Not the elevator. Not the marriage turbulence that she herself alchemized into lemonade. Not the plagiarism accusations, not the lip-sync discourse, not the genre wars. The brand absorbed everything. And now the vault is open, the clips are multiplying, and somebody is profiting from every single view. So here is my verdict, and then I want yours, because this one genuinely belongs in the comments. The 2001 footage, stripped of hysteria, shows no crime. What it shows is something colder and, in its own way, more damning. An industry where a teenage girl on a powerful man's lap did not even register as unusual. If your reaction to that is just how it was back then, congratulations, you have described the entire problem. As for the country clip, it is real, it is awkward, and it is also a teenager's taste being held against a 40-something artist's evolution. You decide how much weight that deserves. And as for who benefits from the vault opening right now, with a 3-part docuseries on the way and engagement money raining on everybody holding a piece of the archive, that one, I will leave as an exercise for the jury. But I need 3 things from you before we wrap, and do not be shy, because the comment section is where this case actually gets tried. 1. Was Beyoncé a teenager failed by the room, or a young professional in a normal 2001 studio session that we are judging through a 2026 microscope? 2. Who do you think benefits most from this footage surfacing at this exact moment? And does the docuseries timing smell like coincidence to you? 3. Does the country clip change anything about how you see that Grammy, or is a decades-old soundbite just noise? Sound off below, respectfully, because this one involves a teenager, and I will be down there reading. If this video charged you up, hit like, share it with somebody who remembers the Destiny's Child era, and subscribe with notifications on. Because if part 1 of this archive caused this much smoke, you already know I will be right here the second parts 2 and 3 drop. The vault is open now. It does not close. And what rolls out of it next is anybody's guess. So keep your eyes open, keep your receipts ready, and I will catch you on the next one. And let us zoom all the way out for a second, because this story was never only about one superstar. Think about the era this footage comes from. The turn of the millennium was the golden age of the teen star economy. A whole generation of young women, from the R&B prodigies to the pop princesses to the girl groups orbiting TRL, were packaged, polished, and placed into rooms full of adults twice their age, and the culture applauded the polish without ever once auditing the rooms. The photos were glamorous. The interviews were rehearsed. The adults collected the checks. And the question this footage really raises is not, what happened on that one afternoon? It is, how many afternoons like that were there? Across how many studios, how many labels, how many young women whose names we will never know because nobody was filming, or because whatever was filmed is still sitting in a vault waiting for its own docuseries moment. And about that protection question, because I keep coming back to it, and so does the comment section, there is a harder version of it that nobody wants to sit with. A fortress is only a fortress if it guards every door. The Knowles operation was legendary for crushing image threats. Unflattering stories got managed, access got rationed, narratives got controlled with a precision the industry still studies. So the existence of a casual, unguarded afternoon like this one forces an uncomfortable fork in the road. Either the fortress had a blind spot, a day where commerce outranked custody and nobody thought twice about a producer's lap because a Michael Jackson record was on the line, or the fortress simply did not consider that kind of room a threat at all, because in 2001, nobody did. Neither answer is comforting. The first means protection failed when it mattered. The second means the entire definition of protection back then never included the room itself, only the publicity around it. And honestly, that second answer might be the most damning thing this footage proves about the era, that guarding a young star's image and guarding a young star were understood as 2 different jobs, and only one of them had a department. Now, let us talk about the economics one more time, because this is the layer almost nobody covering this story will admit out loud. Outrage is the rollout. Yes, but the machine does not stop at the docuseries. Every channel covering this clip, every reaction video, every stitched frame, every think piece, including this one, and I will own that, is a node in the same engagement engine. That is why I have been so careful tonight to separate what is confirmed from what is rumored, because the engine does not care about that distinction. The engine pays for heat, not accuracy. A clip of a nervous teenager becomes a verdict. A decades-old soundbite becomes a fraud conviction. And the faster the takes fly, the less anybody stops to ask the only questions that actually matter. What would real evidence of harm look like? Testimony. Her own words, in her own time, if she ever chose to give them. What we have instead is a vibe. A genuinely chilling vibe. A vibe worth discussing. A vibe that says something true about an era, but a vibe nonetheless. And a culture that convicts on vibes is a culture that can be pointed at any target, on any week, by anybody holding a piece of footage and a release schedule. So here is the double-edged truth I want to leave standing. Both of this week's narratives can be partly true at once. A 19-year-old can be a willing, ambitious professional and a teenager inside a system that failed to protect her. Those are not contradictions. They are the same sentence. An artist can genuinely evolve into a genre and have her old soundbite weaponized against her by people who never wanted her in that genre to begin with. The machine around her can be the most sophisticated protection racket in music history and still have left the actual human being exposed in all the ways that did not photograph. Nuance does not trend, I know. But nuance is what this story deserves, because the person at the center of that 2001 room was a teenager, and the person at the center of this 2026 firestorm is a woman who has never once told her side of that day. Which brings us all the way back to where we started. Somebody unlocked a vault that was supposed to stay sealed forever. The first reel is out. The reaction has been measured in the millions. And there are reportedly more reels where that one came from. More sessions, more rooms, more afternoons from an era that never expected to be audited. Whatever is on those tapes, understand what tonight proved. The footage itself is only half the weapon. The other half is us, what we project onto it, what we convict on, what we forgive, and what we are willing to click. The era on that tape is gone. The receipts are not. And the gap between those two facts is where every conversation worth having about the old industry now lives. Keep your eyes open. Keep your receipts ready. I will see you in the comments and in the next one.